spawn meets world, spawn meets world. When the spawn meets world, when the spawn meets world.
Recording in progress.
Okay, they tell you just so you know.
Bro, what's up? How you doing?
Oh my God, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. There's just so much going on. There's so much to update you on, but mostly it is hot in Topeka. Like it is so hot here.
There's a heat wave happening in LA right now, and it's unmanageable. My AC cannot keep up. I think both of us have fans running in the background. So if you guys hear fans in the background, we're not going to do anything about that. I got to stay cool, y'all. I can't sweat to death during this podcast.
If you hear fans, or you are fans, or you have an OnlyFans.
Okay.
Either way, we're happy that you join us.
Make that feet money pick. Feet pick money.
I do not have photo worthy feet, or else it may be a career change that I need some extra dollars. So
I do not judge at all. I wish I could make money from feet pics. Oh my God, the dream.
I tell people all the time, my love handles and my mama. If either one of them go away, it's over for you bitches.
Oh my gosh.
So
today...
T, I will say,
oh yeah, go ahead.
You froze a little bit. You froze. I just wanted to say that. I don't know if that's like me or you, but you froze.
Okay, I'll see if I can cut around that.
Okay. All right. So
am I still freezing?
Yeah, you're kind of like a little delayed, but not like a lot. So again, we've had these recording issues before. It's our 100th. I would love to not have the issue again.
100 episodes in, we still having these issues.
Of course, the phone rings right now.
Take it. Go ahead.
It's almost always telemarketers, but I'm just saying that like
I get calls from Florida all the time, and I'm like, no one from Florida has any business calling me.
Exactly.
I know you're playing games.
No one. If you're not my mom, there's literally no reason to call me if you're from Florida.
Gosh.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I just want to say, like, and I can edit this out, but just to kind of like start us off, like, how you doing? How's Rex? How's work? Like,
I was gonna say, you can keep some of this. I missed you, bruh. It's been a while, even for us.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It has been a minuto. I don't think that's the right word, but whatever. I'm tired. Happy podcasting, people. I guess we could just, if you hear us rambling, just know that it's one of those days. But more than anything, I think what you're waiting for us to say is, what up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
And it's Bruh Meets World.
Your boy meets world fun cast. I am Ceej.
And I am your co-host, Tony Curtis.
And this is our 100th episode.
Yes, it is our 100th episode of this podcast. I don't think it's the 100th episode of the show.
No, or maybe, I don't know. I think what's really important is that we have been recording, we've had like our little side episodes, things come and go. But long story short, you have been listening to us for 100 of these bad boys, bear men. Thank you for hanging in there. We know we had some rough roads in the past. We have some rough roads now, but
guys, we want to thank you guys for sticking with us for 100 episodes. If you've been with us since the beginning, if you're just finding us, thanks for coming on board to the Bruh Meets World fam. As Ceej has stated, this is just something me and him have been doing in our free time. This is just something that we do for fun. This isn't like this consistent like job that we have that we're like focusing on. This isn't our main source of income. In fact, we make no money from this. This is just something that we do to just have a break from the monotony of life. And so I respect you guys allowing us time to make room for our personal lives. And I know lately our episodes have been kind of all over the place as far as release dates, but things come up, life happens, and
y'all, we living through a pandemic, so
well, I will say this: watching a Christmas episode during a heat wave did help a lot with mentally cooling me down a bit. I have
See, I just want to say really, really quick because it won't make sense a little bit later. Watching this Christmas episode actually and watching Topanga's behavior got me hot, as in angry, as in I have a lot of things pieces.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up because I too have a lot of thoughts about Topanga in this episode and how they portray. Dude, Topanga is a bitch this episode, right? And I say that as someone who like understands that, like, hey, I'm not someone who tries to use that term towards women, but the show wrote Topanga to be that way in this, just like they have for women throughout the last few seasons. We've talked about this before. Topanga steamrolls all over the Matthews Christmas traditions this year, and it's really frustrating to see how it played out.
For me, God, you want to just get into it because like I want to talk about this episode, but of course I want to set it up. And as always, I appreciate you guys for taking the time and dealing with us and our tangents. But I think that leads me and T with the tell me about it.
Yeah, let's jump in and tell me about it. It feels wrong at that key. I know that's lower, but tell us. Yeah, I'm not feeling it. I gotta go high. Tell us about it. Yeah, Topanga is a bitch, and Cory may pull a ditch without a romantic kind of shift.
For those of you who don't know, we are talking about season 5, episode 10, A Very Topanga Christmas. Cory wonders if he's being henpicked when Topanga spends the holidays with the Matthews family and takes charge of the festivities. Cory plans to surprise Topanga, who's spending Christmas at his house, with a promise ring. That means they'll be together forever. But he's unnerved by moments of doubt after learning that he and Topanga, who have so much in common, have very different holiday traditions. She drinks cider rather than eggnog. She prefers a fresh cut tree rather than an aluminum one, and she opens gifts on Christmas Eve and not Christmas morning. When it seems Topanga's unwilling to compromise, Cory has serious misgivings about the ring and their future. At 16, because that's what you do.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So let me just ask you these questions right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, do you have a real tree or a fake tree?
Fake tree.
Oh, okay. I had a real tree.
Well, so like, I think it's also like, when are we talking about this? You know, like when I was really, really young, they went and they splurged. And also we lived in Virginia, you got the real tree. In Florida, they were like, yo, put this thing in a box, take it out. It's just as good. And also, this is before the gram, but you know, it's for the photos. You can't tell in a photo whether or not it's a real tree.
I will say, as someone who grew up with a mom who was very Topanga about a Christmas tree, there's a nostalgia to the smell. That's what it really primarily is. Now, would I impose a 7-hour drive on someone to get the perfect Christmas tree from out of state? Absolutely not.
So it's so funny that you said that, because when they did the drive, it dawned on me. I was like, you know who's not there? Amy. And you want to know why? Because Amy always don't like Topanga. Like, she likes Topanga, but she's like, I'm not putting up with this nonsense. Amy's the real one. Yeah. And they were like, we're going to get Topanga a tree. And she was like, that's a y'all situation. I'm not doing this. That is nonsense. And so, again, if y'all want to go get Topanga a tree 7 hours away, you do you. I'm going to be here baking cookies and not ruining my holidays, because that's nonsense.
So what we're referring to is, Topanga sees that the Matthews have this fake tree and that they're drinking eggnog instead of cider. By the way, I'm team eggnog. I don't know where you land on that.
See, I don't like milk-based drinks. Like, I don't.
Bro, we're Topanga and Cory in this.
We are, but you know what? You know what I didn't say? I didn't say, TC, this podcast will never make it. I mean, like, you like eggnog, I like cider. What are we supposed to do?
Whoa.
Talking to each other?
We may not be able to do this podcast if we don't agree on this, Ceej. We might have to cut all ties. I don't like orange juice. I'm gonna break up with you. Yeah. So
here's like, if you bring up something like, I don't like orange juice, I think I'm gonna break up with you. It's not about the orange
It's
juice.
not. It's never been. And okay, so that really brings me to the thing I really want to talk about, which is the whole idea of promise rings and teenagers giving each other promise rings. Did you know anything about promise rings or anyone who gave promise rings?
Of course, you and I both grew up in a very religious environment. Of course, I knew about
Yeah.
promise rings. And then there was that whole wave with the Jonas Brothers and their promise rings. And it's just honestly, it sounds to me like something a marketing company came up with and was like, okay, you're not going to marry her just yet. How about a promise ring that can get 16-year-olds to still buy jewelry? And it makes no sense. And if anything, it's kind of creepy. It's kind of like putting someone on layaway.
I think it's cultish, and I think it stems from purity culture and this idea of staying pure and all this shit, which apparently Cory and Topanga kind of lean into. I mean, apparently they gave each other promise rings. Oh man.
This is what I'm saying. Like it's definitely putting a person, specifically a female's virginity, on layaway and being like, oh, you can't do anything, because everyone knows that men don't approach women with rings, because that's just kind of like a man's claim of being like, she's taken property of so and so. So when they see it, even at 16, they'll be like, oh, she's off limits. And if you don't have a problem with that, you have a problem.
Well, it's also interesting to me knowing this show that Cory's giving her a promise ring and legit cheats on her in like 3 episodes.
You will not let that go.
I can't let it go. I can't hey, I want to. This gift is a lifelong commitment. It is what we're meant to believe. But literally within like weeks, that whole commitment is shaken up. And I just think that's so interesting that they knew when they were planning the season that they were going to do a promise ring and a cheat episode like relatively close together. That's crazy to me.
Okay, so 2 problems with your theory. One is that you think any of these writers thought ahead to later on in the season. We take it one day at a time. We take it one episode at a time. Who knows? Next week, we could be going to space. I don't know. So there's that. And then second of all is we all know that, at least as far as pop culture, especially in the 90s, were concerned, women are faithful. So the promise ring is for her. Men don't get the ring until the actual marriage, and therefore no ring, no thing. Like they I don't have a promise ring. I'm just living my life, doing me.
Like a peek behind the curtain of the patriarchy right now. Just like this claim is on her exclusively, even though they both have rings. Man, I only say this too because I grew up like you around a lot of Southern Baptist Christian people and families and friends, and there were promise rings, and to me it just feels like a lot of like this decision for like to put on, for example, I'm sorry if my thoughts are getting scattered here, but Cory is freaking out for good reason right now, because he's like, oh, I didn't realize this is the rest of our lives we're talking about. I didn't realize that this is something that I'm gonna have to deal with forever. Like, it's just like, but I'm also giving her a promise ring saying that I'm down to do it, even though clearly I've demonstrated that I don't understand what that even means, I guess is the main takeaway that I took from that.
No, absolutely. And like, just the reality is, you don't know at that age. Like, it's the equivalent of a dare promise. Like you're like, oh yeah, I'll never do drugs. And yeah, that's a great promise to make at 16 and mean it at 16. At 26, a little less so. At 36, hell no, I'm gonna do what I want. And that's what these systems are. Things like promise rings and the dare promise and all of this. It is really to control children's behavior. And then who takes a promise more seriously? A child who doesn't know how the world works, or an adult who's just like, yeah, okay, whatever.
I really wonder where this whole idea of a promise ring even came up for either of them, because to me promise rings stem from religion, and neither of their parents seem to be very religious. So I'm just interested in what that is even about.
Well, I mean, you're forgetting that, especially in the 90s and even some now, but like a lot of American culture is based in religious behavior. And you don't have to be religious to be conservative in your thinking and approach to things, especially in America, especially for middle class white families in America who probably go to church once a year. And the whole reason of going to church once or twice a year is to check in and remind yourself of these values that America supposedly holds dear. And I saw it as a very likely scenario that someone like Cory, who again has committed himself to his girlfriend, he and Topanga very often act like a married couple. Like I could see them wanting to imitate marriage in that way, but I do not think it's a healthy approach. And I think that he is right to also question some things, but it's the extremes to which he questions things and the kind of like encouragement from his family when Eric's like, this is you and the rest of your life. It's like, oh, I would just be like, I mean, I would say something, but ultimately this relationship isn't supposed to last outside of high school. So
tell Cory, like, hey, this isn't the rest of your life. This isn't a pressure that you need to figure out that's going to have lifelong consequences. This is just high school. This, if you don't like it, dude, date someone else. Like, it's fine. And no one is saying that to Cory, not even Amy, who should be the one saying that. And I get it. She wants to keep the peace for the holidays. But Amy, we need you to hard pedal the real, because Cory is given promise rings about purity, but also inviting Topanga into her bed, into his bed in the middle of the night. So which is it, Cory? Like, which is it?
Again, it's whichever one makes the most sense to me. Like, which one will get me the most benefit is the real answer. And then also, I think that you have to remind yourself that, again, back then, and even now, so to speak, we're not telling fully grown adults that you don't have to go through this. Do you know how many relationships adults, like 20, 30, sometimes 40-year-olds, are in a relationship where things aren't working and they're like, we don't really have things compatible, but we've been together forever, so I guess I just stay. Like, that's just such a common thing. And it's like, no, it's completely normal to have different interests, but it's also completely normal to be like, yo, the fact that you put orange juice and grapefruit juice in the same glass and expect me to drink it really is a flag for me. Like that is something that will bother me day in and day out. And so we should talk about whether or not this is something that is really compatible.
Thank you. I'm so glad you brought up, like, just hey, we should talk about this, because the entire time I'm thinking, okay, so Cory has a real issue here with setting boundaries. He is letting Topanga do whatever, and the thing is that Topanga's not even trying to take over the Matthews Christmas. She's just excited about Christmas, and at no point does Cory say, actually, we actually really like this tree, or I do want the star on the top of the tree. By the way, did you have a star or an angel on top of your Christmas tree?
Angel.
Interesting. We started angel and then went to light up star.
Yeah, so I'm actually trying to think now. I think this year, I think with my boyfriend we have the star, but like growing up, I think it was angel. And then also, again, for me at this point in time, I'm like, whatever, it's a tree decorated, like change the theme every year. I do know, like, you're right, there's a certain sentimentality to Christmas trees, and Christmas time specifically is a very unique time because it's very much around family and tradition and what you did the year before. So I get that. And I even saw Topanga kind of like wanting to bring in a little bit of her family, which she said she was okay with it, but it also felt like her parents just abandoned her. And she was like, yo, it's fine, I'm gonna do it with Cory. Like, that's kind of like her delivery she had. And so I could see her like really missing her family and really like trying to bring them in. I can see that. But also, as you said, it's very much up to Cory and be like, hey, yeah, we can compromise and we'll drink eggnog now, and then a little bit we'll get you some cider, or we'll do it tomorrow. What are your traditions? Well, let's see if we can fold some of this in, not just straight up giving into it, because this is a me thing. I'm not that person. Not when I went to the grocery store and bought all this stuff. You should have said something earlier.
It's also strange to me, like, okay, so I love what you said about Topanga feeling lonely and abandoned by her parents and needing those traditions to comfort her in the time where she feels isolated amongst her adopted family, so to speak. I wish they would have leaned into that more. I wish Topanga would have said something like, hey, I never see my parents. These traditions are making me feel at home. Something to make us sympathize with her versus her just wanting it her way, which is how it's shown throughout the show. Um, I can't imagine ever like being a guest at someone else's house on Christmas and not being like, oh, like I would imagine I'm going to spend Christmas with another family. I'm going to see all new traditions and I'm just going to experience Christmas in their way. I would never ever think to come into another person's home on Christmas and then make it all of my shit. Like that just seems so inconsiderate. Like she's so painfully unaware of how inconsiderate she is that it just who is this Topanga?
Yeah, very, very much. Well, first of all, she is the Topanga that they need her to be. This Topanga is very much a blank slate where they just like input girlfriend tropes onto Topanga. But then again, it's very much like I can see the character Topanga behaving this way. Again, not really, but like I'll give you the argument that the character Topanga has behaved this way. She's a child. That makes sense. It is the adults. Like they had no problem with Shawn. Well, actually, they did have a problem with Shawn. They were very passive aggressive with Shawn when Shawn moved in. But it's like, no, you set boundaries. You're like, this is how we do things. And then you're right. As a guest, it's like, did her parents like, I don't know, maybe this is like a person of color thing, but I can't imagine anybody's house and my mama hearing that I went in there and made demands on Christmas. No, 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 no. You respectfully sit there. I'm allergic to half the stuff that people serve at Christmas. And I'm still like, thank you. I'll make do. I try to let them know ahead of time so no one feels put out. But like, that's how you're a guest in someone's house. And of course, they want you to make you feel comfortable, but that's like in the small things. They don't change their traditions. It's
a great example of when like entitlement in white women. This like, hey, I'm entitled to the things I want, but it's from this place of like, hey, like I'm a girl, don't be a dick about it. Like, this was what makes me happy. Happy wife, happy life. Ha ha ha. And it doesn't feel like at any point does Topanga apologize for not respecting the Matthews traditions. Like she apologized. She's like, I'm sorry, my family has different traditions than you. But that's not the apology. The apology was that you didn't respect any of my family's traditions in my family's house when they were kind enough to let you stay. And that's the big thing about Topanga that just kind of like 7 hours in a car to Vermont. I Googled it. I Googled mapped it. I was like, I have to see how long this will take. Have you ever driven with a Christmas tree on the roof of your car? It's terrifying. It's terrifying. You're constantly worried it's going to roll off. You can't get on the highway with that. Nonetheless, a multi-state road trip, impossible.
Exactly. And this is what I meant. Like I said it earlier, I'll say it again. There's a reason Amy wasn't involved in the earlier scenes because Amy's just the real character. And Amy would have been like, nah, son, Topanga gonna get this aluminum Christmas tree. We'll get her a pine fresh, like air freshener and take it from there. Like you want to be accommodating, but you don't want to just change everything about your family traditions because again, then the following year, sorry, not the following year, but like this year, what you're doing is you're disrupting their traditions and they have things that they've done time and time again. And it's very easy sometimes to fold those things. And, like Topanga could have been like, hey, my family usually does roles. Mr. Feeney, do you mind if I read it with you? Or like, maybe we just dress up and listen to you. Like they have their traditions. You ask and see if you can modify, not demand. And then also like, I will say, like, she doesn't really demand, but she just kind of like, as you said, does that white woman thing where it's like, I mean, like, it'd be really nice if we did. I'm not saying that you have to. I'm just saying that, like, I'm alone on Christmas and my parents aren't here. So, I mean, it'd be nice to have some cider.
Specifically from Vermont. Eric.
And then wait. And then when she got there, she was like, and now that we're here, can we get some syrup? Again, to me, girl, if you don't get in this car.
Yeah. 7 hours there and back. That's a 14-hour total trip for this chick. Eric brings up a really good, like a valid issue pretty early on. He's like, dude, why are you letting her walk all over you? Like, why are you like, he's noticing the codependency and the lack of boundaries being set. And it's something that like Cory kind of brushes off, but it never like it built like okay. I guess what I'm trying to say is that like there's no like Cory silently resents Topanga throughout the entire episode and then finally explodes on her. Instead of just communicating and setting healthy boundaries at the beginning. I think that's kind of what I got from this whole thing is that no one is setting healthy boundaries with each other.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I keep going back to like Alan and Eve because I feel like even it's not just Cory. Alan keeps being like, like I think it's nice that he says, your mom wants to talk in the middle of the night. I can't sleep, but that's what she needs. So I stay up and I like make him out of planes. I don't have a problem with that. That's like, I love my wife. We have this bond. She needs to talk in the middle of the night to help her go to sleep. That's okay. But the way that they sell it, and then the fact that they use it as an analogy to Topanga's demands, it's kind of like women be demanding. This is, like women rule the house. What are you going to do except have insomnia and then just ignore all your feelings? It's like, no, I honestly, like, I was listening to Cory when she was like, what do you usually do at 3 a.m.? He's like, sleep. Like, yeah. Traditionally I sleep. Like I was like, no, I'm Cory in that moment where it's like, no, why did you wake me up? To talk at 3 a.m.? How about you write down what you want to talk about and I'm going to sleep?
Well, okay, so in that regard, like, I really did feel like this episode played up gender roles in that way, as like women are the ones who are up late worrying all the time, like while the men have to find ways to deal with the women. And I feel that was confirmed with Alan being like, I've been saving these model planes for each of my sons, not for each of my children, each of my sons. Morgan doesn't need one because she's going to be the one waking men up, because that's how women be, according to Boy Meets World.
As a gay man, I can tell you that my boyfriend completely wakes up in the middle of the night being like, hey, I can't sleep. And as I said, I'm like, that's us for you. You get you get 5 minutes. And then I'm out. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. One thing I wanted to point out was that I wanted to go back. You had mentioned the Christmas Carol thing with Feeney. Topanga was at Christmas last year with the Matthews. Like, she's been spending Christmases with, she knows these traditions is what I mean. Here's a quick trivia for you. Do you remember who the Matthews spent Christmas with last season? In season 4, last year, according to the show, who was there other than Topanga?
I honestly, like, my mind is going blank.
Yes.
I honestly can't think of anyone right now. I just don't know.
Okay, so Shawn was there.
Okay.
Obviously. 2 other ones, Jonathan Turner and Lonnie, were at Christmas last year. Do you remember Lonnie from the she worked at the sporting goods store?
Yes.
Just from the mountains.
Wow. So, like, blast from the past.
He was just in the show last season. You completely forgot about it.
Didn't even, like, you said Lonnie, and I was like going through all the male characters to think. I was like, no, that's not the grocery store dude. That's not Lonnie. But wow, that's crazy.
It was the episode where Eric and her were stuck in that car and they had to like get naked in the sleeping bag together. But I went back to see it because I was like, yeah, Topanga was there. So she knows these traditions. She knows what's up.
And yeah, that's another thing. Like, when they were like Topanga's first Christmas, I was like, or what happened even more so, there was a moment where she was like, do you ever wake up in the middle of the night? And he was like, no, never. And I was like, actually, season 1 or season 2, the whole finale is the fact that you woke up in the middle of the night. Like, that was the premise. So
totally, yeah. This is shit they go back and forth. I think they even have a real Christmas tree in previous episodes. Like, I don't think there's any consistency or thought into this.
We talk about this, just so you know. Boy Meets World is in the multiverse theory. Each episode of Boy Meets World is actually a different universe of Boy Meets World, and actually that would make a lot more sense.
Yes, 100%.
So, all right, really quickly, what I was going to say is that I also did like, there was a little bit of Jack in this episode. And I liked the idea of Jack being like, yo, I don't know Topanga that well. And I was like, yes, thank you for acknowledging. He's like, I don't know her.
Well, it's interesting because, okay, it's one thing to be like, I don't really know her that well. And then Topanga shows up like 3 minutes later, and Jack is like, hey, Cory, some girl is here to see you. As if he doesn't know who Topanga even is. Like, she was just at your house for Thanksgiving, bro. Like, she was just there. She's there all the time.
Little known fact, Jack has face blindness.
I thought you were going to say, I actually do have a fun fact about this, which is that Matthew Lawrence and Danielle Fishel, who played Jack and Topanga, actually dated in real life around the time that this episode was going down.
I assumed, because I was like, I felt when they have that scene where they're kissing, I was like, this felt like the writers being like, you get to kiss Matthew Lawrence. And I was like, yeah, it felt like a...
It was like those two characters literally have no business kissing each other. So it felt like something that was written in because of their off-camera relationship.
Absolutely. So, you know, I am glad that we got to use Jack a little bit better. And then also in reality, the idea that Topanga would like be with, you know, it's not like an unrealistic future, you know, like sometimes they do stuff like that.
They're
but
both
I was like,
attractive people. Of course they would gravitate towards each other. Yeah.
exactly. But like, again, I didn't like the idea of, because you guys didn't agree with this. Actually, like the worst thing about the future is that Topanga has moved on and found someone else. It's, you know, like that is the worst case scenario. And then also a little bit of fat phobia, of course, being like, oh, what's even worse, not only do you not have Topanga, but you're fat. So your life is over.
I'm sorry, you froze a little bit. Can you repeat that?
Sorry. Yeah, no. I said the fact that, you know, Topanga's moved on and found somebody else, and you've grown up and you've gotten fat. Worst case scenario. In America, that's the absolute worst thing that could ever happen to you. Because, you know, according to American television, there is no such thing as a fat guy with a hot wife. Never happened. Ever.
The idea that in the 90s, the worst thing that could happen is that you break up from your high school sweetheart and put on pounds in your 30s. I'm like, isn't that what happened to literally everyone? Like, this is an inevitable thing in some for a lot of people. And so for them to put it as like, this is the ghost of Christmas future, this is the worst case scenario. It's like, this is actually the most likely scenario.
So, but I think like let's think about who's writing this. I think think about LA. In LA, like everyone prides themselves on not being that statistic. They're not like their friends back in their hometowns who gained weight, and there's just like, that is why I think you get this trope all the time where it's like, oh, and then he grew up and he was just like every other regular American. Unlike LA, where it's like it's your job to kind of present yourself as someone who made it out of a small town and looks better, does better.
Well, I mean, that would explain why the guy who is casted as Fat Cory to me was like moderately overweight. Like, he didn't seem like obese or anything. And maybe that's just because like standards for weight in the 90s were like, you know, Kate Moss, you know, so I maybe in comparison, but the dude just didn't seem like, he was kind of a chubby dude, but he wasn't like, I don't know. I'm not trying to fat shame the way the show is.
Well, no. I think you're right. It's one of those things where they're like, you don't have the bottom. Sorry, you don't have the bottom. You don't have the body of a 60-year-old boy anymore at the age of 32. And you're like, yeah, you won't. I'm gonna tell you right now, you ain't keeping that metabolism. Tell kids the truth.
One thing I wanted to mention about the scene in Shawn and Jack's apartment is Cory worrying about Topanga liking different stuff, like, oh, she likes her orange juice this way and she likes her tree this way. It felt very much like the episode we saw a few episodes ago in this season where Jack and Eric are on a double date and they switch dates because they want to date the person that they're most like instead of the person that would compliment them. And they make this whole reference of like, no one makes a peanut butter and peanut butter sandwich or something like that.
Yeah.
Which to me is everything that Cory's bitching about in this episode, to the point where I'm just like, it felt I wish the writers would have given them a different conflict to have than just, oh, she likes her orange juice differently to me. To me, it felt so shallow, it felt so surface level, and it felt like a lesson that was already taught through the show in a previous episode this season.
Well, again, and we can do things. Boy Meets World multiverse theory is how I'm going to explain these things moving forward. But also, I think that um, it's important for us to note, again, it's very common for people to not, or for our culture to promote similarity as reasons to stick together. It's like, oh, you guys like the same things, you guys can go. Like that's literally what we tell kids, boys growing up. It's like, think about 500 Days of Summer, where again, remember, it's that whole getting him out of that delusion that just because you guys like the same music means that you're meant to be together. Like that's just what we define or what we tell kids at a very young age. Oh, you guys like the same things, you like the same music, you like the same t-shirt, well then maybe you guys have so much in common, it's bound to work. And it's like, no, in reality, what you need most importantly is mutual attraction, mutual tolerance for the other person's misgivings, like that's what the only thing that's going to work. As long as you have those two things, anything can work out.
And communication skills, which Cory and Topanga are severely lacking in their relationship.
But again, they're 16. And I think that's the thing. It's like, this would be great if they were like, yo, you're 16-year-olds, you don't really know how to communicate. That's not on you. This is a good lesson. Yeah. Instead, they're like, hey, you're 16-year-olds that we're putting in a situational comedy like you're 32. So act like 2-year-olds and go.
Yeah. Propose. Go. What? I overall really didn't like Topanga in this episode at all. I don't know if we're supposed to. I don't know if at any point she's supposed to redeem herself, but I don't feel as though her character redeems herself for just really steamrolling all over the Matthews this Christmas. I don't know if you came around to forgiving her towards the end or not.
Again, I'll say I did, but only because I'm like, it was written this way, the character was put in this situation, whatever, come see, come saw. Like, that's how I felt about it. I did not feel like, oh, Topanga learned a lesson and she apologized, because no, she didn't. I felt like she was being manipulative in this episode. I felt like there was a lot of passive aggressiveness. I felt like, but then again, as I said, I felt like it's all being reinforced by the adults in the situation. So.
Any thoughts on Jack and Shawn's storyline?
I think we've done this a few times. They're getting to know each other, and like they constantly have this kind of like divide, the haves and the have-nots. I grew up with money, I didn't. And I think that I hope we move past this because it's getting tiring, but also it makes sense. Like this is their first holiday together, and one person's used to going skiing and one person's used to checking out with other people's families. So I think it's great that they acknowledge that and they don't just play it off, but it is kind of getting a tired trope. So I hope we move on.
Yeah, to me, it kind of feels like, I think it was like season 3 where they were like, every episode was them trying to make a name for themselves in high school. It kind of feels like we're seeing a very similar pattern with this kind of like rich kid, poor kid sibling dynamic. One of the things I want to point out is that Jack and Shawn are talking about their Christmas traditions, and Jack says, oh, my family goes skiing in the French Alps every year. And Shawn says, oh, at the trailer park, we just thank God for the things that we have. And you know what, as much as this is like a joke, I think this is also like the show making a very valid point about the relationship of wealth and gratitude.
Well, so no, like I was gonna, like, I see where you're going with it, but I disagree in the sense that what it does is it villainizes money, again, as a television show that totally makes money. And they're like, oh no, the true value is intimacy and family and being close together. And it's like, that's true, but let's not pretend that rich people don't also have those things. There are plenty of rich people who have their own traditions and they take Christmas very seriously. And just because they bought their kid a literal pony for Christmas. Like that's their version of expressing love. Like that doesn't make it any less so. And I do think there's this idea of being poor is bad, but being rich is evil. And do I feel that way on a economic scale? Absolutely. But do I feel that way on a personal level? No. Like that's saying that people are black or white, and I don't agree with that.
I will say that the show does villainize like our Jack for being, I guess, I don't know, I guess rich. Yeah, I guess for his wealth. I didn't really read it as that though. I just read it as a gratitude thing because, like, to feel grateful for what you have. I feel in my observations from coming from like being raised in projects to now being in LA and having access to a lot of people who are very extremely wealthy. In my own personal experience, I have found that people with more money sometimes, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. People who have a lot of wealth and a lot of money often worry about the maintenance and adding on to that to the point where they sometimes can't fully enjoy it. For example, did you grow up with a pool in your backyard?
Yes.
I did not grow up with a pool in my backyard. Anytime I went over to anyone's house who had a pool, I was in that pool all day long. If you grow up in a pool, you're not going to think like, oh man, I'm so grateful that we have a pool in the backyard I can jump in on the summer day. Because after a few years, it's just going to be commonplace. And I do think that that can sometimes like, wealth is just the accumulation of stuff. And the idea that sometimes the stuff is going to, yeah, you're skiing in the Alps, but Jack, do you have a close relationship with your dad? Like there's other things that matter than
agree.
Stuff.
That was like what I'm saying is Jack saying, hold on, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, sorry. I'm just saying I agree with what you're saying overall. I'm saying in the scene, and I'm just taking the scene. In the scene, Jack said, I usually go skiing with my family in the Alps. And Shawn was like, I usually am just grateful for what I can get. And I was just like, okay, that's not a one for one. What you could have said is, oh, that sounds amazing, or we do this, but we enjoyed it just as much, like illustrating that there are two different versions and getting Jack to be like, oh, I never thought about my family trips with my family. Sorry, my family trips. I never thought of the ski trips with my family as something that I valued, but now that I'm not going this year, you're right. I really do miss that. Or it wasn't the ski trip, it was being close. Like there's a way to illustrate that. And instead they were like, oh, he has money. Shallow kid, doesn't even know how to enjoy Christmas. And it's like, that's no.
You know what? If I'm focusing on the prompt, which is what are your Christmas traditions, not the Shawn's response of it. Yes, it is just like you asked me what my traditions were and I'm telling you. So why are you making me feel like a dick about it? Also, the fact that Shawn strangely brings God into this and then like Jack has to be like, oh, we pray on the plane. Like, Shawn, you pick and choose when God is in your life.
Like an American. But yeah, no, I like, again, I didn't want to really get into it because like I again, just overall with the episode, I'm like, and I get where you're going with this. I get the overall mood. I can only take you for what you actually wrote, and your message gets muddled when you try to compare two things that are not related. Like it's very easy again to be like, hey, there is a commercial side of Christmas, and hey, be grateful when like there are those who are less fortunate who are just grateful for the time they get to spend with their loved ones. Like those two things are not mutually exclusive, and one is not necessarily better than the other. To be fair, all of Christmas is a capitalistic money grab. So like again, like who are you judging? That's my whole thing. It's like, oh, they go skiing. It's like if you spend the majority of your paycheck that week on getting your kid shoes or whatever, you're doing so you're spending an exorbitant amount of money for you proportionately. So
to your point, Shawn literally worked for the mob last year so he could buy Cory a nice gift. So I have to agree with you in that regard.
Again, it's whenever you bring the judgment into it, that's where I'm like, okay, well, let's take a step back and really think about this. Because I'm not saying that there isn't, like there is a truth, there is that gap, especially between these two brothers. And I think it's important to bring it up that, like, oh, hey, we're still learning each other, and we're still, like, this is how we grow, by creating our own traditions. I love that. But it's when you're like, oh, because he's rich, he doesn't understand the true meaning of Christmas. It just like previously, it's like, because he's poor, he doesn't know how to live. And,
I think it would have actually been a much stronger episode for Jack to have been like, hey, my parents are going on a trip by themselves. And Sean's like, oh, let's go down to the trailer park. Let me show you what Christmas is like with my family. Like, that would have been almost very similar to how we did with Cory and Thanksgiving, but with Jack realizing that this is his extended family too in some way, and having to come to grips with that, and getting over like all of his shit, and hearing stories maybe about his dad that he didn't know about before. All of that would have just been a much better use of their B storyline than them just being like, well, I like going ice skating. Oh, I like going, like, it just felt like the same shit we've been seeing.
I agree, but then also I thought it would have been, because we used Jack as a sub for Cory later, it would have been very interesting if they would have been like, you know, Jack happens to be in the same room with Topanga, and she's saying all the things that she likes, and Jack's like, oh, I like that too. And, like, they're learning, and then you have this idea that Shawn and Cory are like, oh, we don't have as much in common as they do, and that being like a mutually jealous thing, towards like Shawn is jealous of Topanga because she tends to bond with Jack, and Cory is jealous of Jack because he has more in common with Topanga. And then that scene where they're together makes way more sense, because it's like, oh, you guys have shown that they have similarities, and that's why they make a better fit. But then also you're tapping into the insecurities of the two main characters,
and that's so much better, because what that does is make Cory insecure about himself versus kind of creating problems where there aren't any. Like, just ask for a different kind of juice next time, bro. It's not that hard. I don't.
But again, I think it's hard, because as much as I want to judge Cory, in this same scene, Cory was like, ooh, pancakes, I'm gonna get some syrup. These don't get syrup. Excuse me.
I drove
my food
for the syrup. We're using the syrup. Why did she ask for syrup if she didn't want to use it for her damn pancakes?
I didn't even think about that.
Like, we're all over the place in this episode.
Yeah, I did not even think about that. As a matter of fact, it would have made way more. Again, sorry everyone, but this is just, we're finding all the holes in this. It would have made way more sense for her to be like, don't forget to use the syrup we just bought. And him be like, oh, I do it with sugar or whatever. Like, that would make way more sense than for him to be like, hey, I'm gonna use that syrup that we bought yesterday that you made us go get, and her being like, syrups don't go on pancakes.
And okay, to your point right now, even like, the thing that's so frustrating is Cory is learning like, hey, relationships require compromise. Topanga isn't learning that lesson. Like, if anything, at the end, Cory is Christmas caroling for Topanga, something he openly voiced made him uncomfortable. So he's compromising for her, but I don't see her compromising for him at all.
And again, I think for those who are listening, for us, at least, especially for me, I think it's important that we teach everyone that it's about compromise on both ends, because I think what we're trying to do, again, because of the Alan storyline and Eric's comments, I think they were trying to be like, hey, men, you have to adapt and give for your woman. And it's like, okay, but also she needs to show you respect, because women aren't the end all be all. And I was going to save this for my bruh moment, but like, the idea of women keep men skinny is also, I was just like, so it's her, like, she's going to be the reason why you either gain weight or lose weight. So make sure it has nothing to do with your own well-being. So make sure you keep her around, or else you could get fat. And You don't want that. Like, that's where I was just like, again, like, no, everyone needs to come to the table and everyone needs to communicate, as you said, and then voice their needs.
The episode concludes with Topanga giving Cory a promise ring after he gave her a promise ring. I couldn't help but wondering, like, by the time the episode ended, that like, wow, neither of them thought, hey, we really don't know anything about each other. We really have a lot of learning to do, and we have a lot of growing to do in this relationship. Maybe we shouldn't give each other a damn promise ring. The whole episode to me was like, why you shouldn't give her a promise ring, and then they just end up giving each other promise rings. So I don't know. I don't like this promise ring is so frustrating too because it never even comes back. Like, there's never a point where when they break up, she like throws the ring in his face or anything like that. Like, I don't even think she wears jewelry. Like, it's
It
so
meets world multiverse theory. That's anytime moving forward that we have to deal with this. I'm like, boy meets world multiverse theory. So this Topanga and Cory got promise rings and we never see them again. But next week, when they don't have them on, that's because we're in a completely different multiverse. The rules are all different. That Cory likes grapefruit juice and orange juice together, and that's the only explanation. That's what
I mean,
what
it
I'm
was
going with.
interesting how they linked his obesity to the declining of his mental health after a traumatic event, but it was just played for jokes and laughs more
Yeah,
than
of course.
like, actually diving deep into it.
We don't take mental health seriously in the 90s.
Do we
It's
now? Even like,
actually, I will say, and this is like my perception, and I live in a bubble, so whatever, but I think that we do. I think like this generation, especially the younger generation, like they're all about, I go to therapy. This is what my therapist said. This is the prescription drugs I'm on just to make it through the day. Like I feel like we are unapologetic about our mental health and like our diagnoses and all of these things because we understood. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel the same way. A lot more of my friends are in therapy. They're talking about therapy. They're talking like even the way we communicate, the wordage that we use, like trauma and or just whatever. Like, it just feels like everyone just has a more keen interest into their emotional intelligence. But I feel like that's the bubble I'm in. I don't feel like that goes for everywhere. And I say this, 600,000 people died within the last year, and everyone's yelling about hot girl summer. So are we really taking mental health seriously? I don't know.
Well, see, but this is where we kind of get like a little nuance. We are in LA, and I honestly, maybe my sample size is different, but I will say that I feel like that's the older generation who's like really ignoring it, because a lot of people, let's say the cities and like the urban areas, they do take a lot of people. I've seen a lot of posts be like, hey, just so you know, the exercise company are going to start talking about your body. Your body got you through the pandemic. Ignore it. I saw a lot of people being like, hey, ignore everyone who tells you that you had to do something during this time. You just experienced the pandemic. Like, I think there are a lot of people being like, before we even go there, let's back it up and stop putting on all these expectations.
Yeah.
I've seen it, and I've seen it a lot outside of just my circle. So, and I've seen it specifically on social media. So that's why I'm like, I feel like it's our generation and younger thing, but I could be wrong.
I hope you're right. I hope it is generational and not regional, which I was thinking that maybe it was. But.
I mean, who knows? It's a complicated time that we're in, and I will admit that like there are plenty of things where I'm like, oh, everyone's doing this, and they're like, nah, son, that's just you and your Angelinos.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Or just you and people of color,
It tends to be that way. I don't have anything else to say about this episode.
Yeah,
I don't know if you do either. But.
Long episode. I think we I think it was a good discussion, all things considered. And then I also think that I'm just gonna, as I said earlier, my bruh moment was this idea that there are several things that could be bruh moments, but for me, it was really this idea that women keep men skinny. Like, I just like I saw that and I was like, what are you saying? Like, because he doesn't have someone. You could have shown him on his own. You could have done the whole trope of he's a businessman and he's cold-hearted or whatever, but no, he has to be heartbroken and fat. And like, why?
Yeah. My bruh moment, if I had to pinpoint one, honestly, I don't. If I were Eric, I would never forgive Topanga for making me drive to Vermont. I would never forgive Topanga for a 14-hour drive where he wasn't giving gas money. I would never, like, I would have so much resentment towards Topanga, or I would have just hard pedaled the real and let her hear it up front. I don't know, but like Eric got stuck in that situation, and I can't imagine what that.
I don't. Again, I don't know the situation, but that's not something you get stuck with. That's something you voluntarily say, I'm going to go along with this foolishness, because the answer would be like, do you have a car? If the answer is no, then I'm sorry, you're out of luck. If the answer is yes, here are my keys. If you want to make the drive, make it a you and Cory thing, go for it. But I, for one, will be on the couch watching A Christmas Story, having some eggnog.
That's, you know what, that's a good point. Like in that situation, like Cory wasn't the only one who wasn't creating a boundary. Eric wasn't creating boundaries either. In fact, he was real quick to even he was sorry, my dog messed up my doesn't matter. He was real quick to be like, oh, Topanga, you spent too much on the gift for me. I'm cool with everything else. Like he was like, I'm gonna go give Topanga a piece of my mind. And she's like, oh, is it because I went over the spending limit? I'm sorry, Eric, I just saw something. And he was so quick to be like, it's all good in the hood. I'm getting my gift. So I don't know. I think the Matthews in general as a family needs to talk about boundaries setting. And that's my bra moment.
Clearly. Okay, what grade would you give this?
I really disliked it. This is one of my least liked Christmas episodes that we've had so far too. Like I don't feel like they've done Christmas particularly well. I feel like the Shawn joining the mafia episode, even though it's ridiculous, is far more memorable of a Christmas episode. I can't even remember the Christmas episodes really before that. The one where Cory gives Shawn a present that's too expensive and like they feel weird about it. I think that was season 1. That was a pretty good Christmas episode.
What'd you say?
This episode, I'll give like a C. Maybe
I was gonna say C minus. That's if this is your favorite episode, please message us, defend it, because honestly, like I am always open to hearing how you guys feel about our takes, but in reality, in my opinion, this episode, like it just felt like a relic, and I'm not about it. Again, they're behaving like 32-year-olds, and it's like, no, you're 16.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you know what we didn't do? A Feeny lesson. Do you have a lesson? Do you have a
Feeny lesson? My, like, as an observer watching this, is just that communication is the key to a successful relationship. And if you don't feel like you can freely, openly communicate with your partner, and that it would be received in a healthy way, and that, you know, you can feel like there's progress being made with compromises, that then the rest of it doesn't really matter. Like that's kind of a bedrock foundational thing. And so I think that's my main takeaway from this. Also, if someone makes you drive multiple states with a Christmas tree attached to your roof of your car, they do not love you. Period.
No, how can they? I think it's funny. I like what you pointed out. You were like, not only did they have this entire discussion, but they also still gave each other the promise rings. And it's like, no, you absolutely should have been like, yo, maybe we're not ready to make this step. But that is very much, again, it's like in America in general, but especially at that time, it's like, no, you still get married. Like, are you going to not get married just because you guys aren't compatible? Come on.
Yeah, but honestly, the promise ring thing deserves a moment as well, because the whole idea of promise rings in general are just very creepy and cultish. And
Yeah. I like it. If you had a promise ring, please reach out to us and let us know. And let us know how long you kept that promise.
Didn't like Jonas Brothers fans like wear it and like tribute to the Jonas Brothers? Like it became such like a fad. It was like those Live Strong bracelets. It was so weird how that happened.
South Park has an entire episode about the Jonas Brothers and their promise rings. So yeah. Okay. Homework.
Okay. You know what? I have to say that it's June 15th right now. I saw In the Heights. I want to talk about In the Heights for a second, because there's a lot of controversy around In the Heights. But as an Afro-Latino myself, my mom being Puerto Rican, my dad being Black, it was, I understand the criticisms, but it did not take away from my experience watching the film, enjoying the film, and enjoying the culture that was celebrated throughout the film. Personally, I think the stage rendition is a more superior way to take in that story. But the film, I don't think is harmful. I think, if anything, it does celebrate a culture that doesn't get the representation, even if within that culture there are still issues. And I say this because if you go back and you look at Black films in the early 90s and the 80s, you would be surprised how much colorism plays a part. You would be surprised how
Would
much
I?
Robin
I?
Givens and Halle Berry are considered the love interest versus a darker skinned woman. Like, it's within every culture. And so, like, yes, there's some accountability that should be had, but I don't think the criticism is as deserved as it's been getting. But that's just my own opinion. That is not my homework, by the way. My homework is to say that of the musicals that were released within the last month, Bo Burnham's Inside is my favorite of the two. That's the musical everyone needs to be talking about.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought up Bo. Oh, God. All right, so let me comment on the In the Heights thing,
Yeah,
and then go back to Bo Burnham, because I was going to ask you if it's seen Inside. So Bo Burnham, sorry, Inside, In the Heights, absolutely, like, as someone who used to live in New York, I understand the call out and the frustration, because you're talking about a story specifically in New York, and specifically in this part of Washington Heights. So when you do that and none of the main characters are Afro-Latino, and, you know, like, there just isn't that color diversity the way that there should be, it makes sense that people had a problem with it, because, again, it's like you're talking specifically about my hometown. Like, it'd be different if you just made up an area that was supposed, if this was Gotham, and, you know, like, we could have our own problems with it, but you went to a very specific location and you very specifically excluded people. And then I had this conversation about DE&I inclusion with my company earlier. I reminded them, they were like, oh, everyone who auditioned for it went, there were lots of dark-skinned brown people in the audition and they just weren't as good. And it's like, no, you can find it. I always remind that thing where it's like, I'm getting the numbers wrong, but they're like, Beyonce found 11 Black female violinists.
Yes.
If you look hard enough, you can find these things. And it's like, it can be done. It's like, you just didn't prioritize it. And because you didn't prioritize it, you set yourself up for critique. And that's how I feel about it. It's like, I enjoyed myself. I felt that I was seeing a culture get represented. I loved the fact that they switched between English and Spanish. I love that there was like,
did the Afro-Latino thing occur to you while you were watching it, or was it something that the controversy made you think about?
The I will say, like, I had seen, like, I stopped the clip because I was like, I don't want to go into the movie with this in my head, but it had already infiltrated, and I was like, I'm seeing what they're talking about. And again, it's like, I feel that as someone who is not from Washington Heights specifically, I don't really have a leg to stand on. My critique is just my critique, but I agree with you where it's like, I was still able to enjoy myself, and I felt like it was still a good musical in general. Like, if we are having The Greatest Showman and all these other stuff, I was like, this stands right up there as like a good musical that, to me, made me feel emotions, made me feel the things that I felt you were supposed to feel it while watching.
Totally. I didn't see myself particularly on the screen, but I saw my abuela. I saw, like, my cousins, like, every person looked like someone in my family, to the point where, even though I wasn't that person on the screen, I felt good that my cousin Destiny has someone on screen that kind of has her hair, and, like, you know, like, everyone just has something that they can relate to. And, you know, this wasn't Wakanda, this wasn't Black Panther, this was about Lin-Manuel telling the story of his life, and this is just his experience. So I don't know, I can see it both ways.
Yeah, like, I mean, and that's the thing, it's like, you know, I think it's hard because when they asked about it, the answers were the very typical answers that white directors give. And I think that's a lot of where it comes from. It's like, not only did you make I think it's safe to say not only did you make a casting mistake, but you did so and then doubled down, and then you gave the same answers that we always get. And I think that's one of the things that people really were bothered by, that it's like, oh, you didn't even do your own research, or you didn't even prepare for this question, in any way, shape, or form. So
There's a moment where it's the most obvious to me, because I did see it a second time. The most obvious, there's a point in the nail salon where Daniela says something to the effect of, "We survived slave ships," and I'm like, yes, I know that's true. Puerto Rican history is tied to the slave trade in so many different ways. But if you're going to bring up the slave trade, if you're going to bring up how Africans were infused in Latin culture in Puerto Rico, show us some Afro Latinos. I get it.
Again, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, Burnham Inside.
Yes.
I watched it and I was like literally amazed. I was like, this is so good. And I thought it was good. I won't say it's the greatest special I've ever seen. I won't say but I will say that it felt reflective of what I wanted to see. If I had to see something from a comedian, this is what I wanted to see. I wanted someone to be real. I wanted someone to be like, hey, being inside this past year was hard. Hey, we're all dealing with depression. We're all just trying to make it through. Here's some comedy. Like I saw a lot of takes where people were like, oh, just, that whole thing was like, just tell jokes. And it's like, okay, first of all, no entertainer is required to only fulfill what you want them to fulfill. Like, if this is what he put out and what he put his time into and he got paid for, you have the right to not watch it. That's always an option. And then second of all, I just felt that I was like, I would love to see more of this from celebrity. Like, one of the critiques is like, do we really need a rich white boy to tell us that it was hard? Yes, because he's not specifically saying, hey, because of my money, it's hard, which is like, again, we got from Gwyneth Paltrow. I was like, I ate bread for the first time in years. And it was like, what? No, he was like, this is a experience that I felt, and I hope other people can connect to it. And I think that more of us feel this way. And it's not, he wasn't leaning into his privilege in the way that I feel traditional celebrities who sing, Imagine, like that wasn't what this was. So yeah.
For those who don't know, the special was filmed, written, edited, directed entirely by Burnham in a single room. And that's what I knew going into that special. And to me, the thing that I love about the special, yes, there are some very clever, very smart observations that he's making about society and the patriarchy and the internet that are just really fascinating that we can go into. But if nothing else, I think it's such an amazing documentary of what the pandemic year felt like. Like, if nothing else, it felt like I was watching someone start the pandemic and end the pandemic within a single shot, and feeling all the emotions, feeling all the frustrations, feeling all the depression. Like, everyone was like, oh, it wasn't very funny. And I'm like, you tried to be funny during a pandemic then? Like, Dave Chappelle can't be funny during a pandemic. So why are you putting
again? I think that's the thing. It's like first of all, it didn't say comedy special. like
special. It said I have a special. That's it.
Yeah, it didn't say comedy special. And I think it's this idea. It's like, oh, you're a comedian. You're supposed to make us laugh. I'm the only supposed to live and breathe. Like, that's the only thing I'm supposed to do. Number one. Number two is it felt more like a one-man show. And I was like, all right, that's what this is. This is an entertainer who usually uses comedy, who's now experimenting with a one-man show. And I think he did it I think he did a great job. I think his editing was really good. Some of the things worked, some of the things didn't, but that's what a one-man show is. It felt like someone trying to evolve. And I respected him for that. But then also, as you said, my birthday wasn't during the pandemic, but there are plenty of people whose birthdays were, and I know people who did double birthdays. And so that moment where he turns 30 and he's just like, I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to get out, and I'm just in this room. I was like, it felt so relatable. And I was like,
universal.
Yes.
Like, he pointed out all the things that separate us from him. He pointed out his privilege. He pointed out being a cis white male. Like, he pointed out all of the advantages he has, but at the same time, I felt the same depression during this year that he illustrated throughout the show. So there's a universal kind of bond because we all know what it was like to be stuck inside of a room too long and
Yes.
all the thoughts that affect you in that. I just want to point out that his editing is fantastic in it. The lighting that he does, he really has more of a theatrical background. If you go back and watch any of his special, I've been following him since like YouTube, and every single special he's put out, every comedy album, there was like, at first it was like a lot of silly Weird Al type of songs, and then every now and then there'd be like, oh, that was actually very smart. And then the next special would be like a little bit more introspective, a little bit more thoughtful, to the point where the last two specials, especially this one and his previous one, Make Happy, to me feel like theatrical one-man shows, as you explained, that aren't so much comedy stand-up as performances about comedy and stand-up, which is a big difference. And I think really refreshing. Like I can see any stand-up go in front of a microphone and just tell jokes for 2 hours. Like this was so nice to see something different. So it's definitely the top of my homework recommendations, as well as In the Heights. I think that it does deserve a watch for those who are curious about it.
All right, thank you so much. So no, I was about to say, so very much like you, I'm gonna do like a 2-for, which is to say, going on the diversity and casting, Megan Thee Stallion's Thought Shit. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen the video. I've been on.
Dude, I sent you the video.
I know, dude. I was in Chicago this weekend for a wedding. Like I was just out and about. I've been
Watch it
all morning.
I watched it and I noticed that all of her background dancers are Black women, dark-skinned Black women, all of them, different body types, but like they're all, I was like, oh, she was like, no, this is representation. I don't need like, and again, it's nothing against, she's had plenty of people of diverse backgrounds in her videos, but that's not what this was for. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's very, very easy to do when you're trying to do it. And I loved it. I love the song. I love the music video.
I have heard the song. I haven't seen the video yet.
You gotta watch the video. Specifically, you gotta watch it. You'll love it. So there's that. And then my homework actually is, you guys know we are really into promoting other kind of recap shows and podcasts and media. There's a YouTube channel called Nerdstalgic, and they did a YouTube clip, like a 10-minute video called "Why Boy Meets World Was the Show of a Generation." Yeah, and
you also sent me this video. I have not watched it yet.
Watch it. I highly recommend, especially if you're listening to this show, to watch it. I thought they made up some very good points, which is basically, without really going into the details, Boy Meets World was a unique show because it grew up with its characters. Like, unlike shows to where the characters age at the same time as you, so like you get your Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or your Saved by the Bell or Dawson's Creek or anything like this. Yeah, all of it, they age and they get older, but everything kind of stays the same. You still have that formula of the TV show. Whereas Boy Meets World, and we've talked about this, Boy Meets World is a different show every season because what Cory's dealing with is a different theme every season. Like, he's not who he was when he was 10. So the show ages and the show changes as he ages and changes. And we often talk like that was kind of like the Achilles heel of Girl Meets World, is like they wanted to age up the content and what they talked about, and Disney didn't want to do it. Like, they wanted to play it safe, and it's like, no, that was what made Boy Meets World special. That's why this generation connects to it, because they were like, oh, hey, I was going through those exact same things at the exact same time. Or even if I wasn't, that was what our generation was dealing with. And so the topics changed. If Cory was still talking about baseball and all this other stuff with his father, like he was in season 1, then this wouldn't be the show that it was. Again, it would just be Family Matters or Full House, to where it just got repetitive and you kind of fell out. Whereas Boy Meets World really did try to grow with its audience. And just watch the video. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to give that a shout out.
It's a great point. And as I reflect on a lot of sitcoms that focus on children actors in the 80s and 90s, like I can't think of another show that aged along and that didn't feel restricted in its format. You know, if you watch a Home Improvement episode from season 6 and the Home Improvement episode from season 2, it's ultimately going to feel like the same show.
Yeah.
But just everyone's a little bit older. And I think to your point, you're like the content actually got older as well as the character. So yeah, I'm interested to check it out.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my homework. Thank you guys so much, as always, for listening to Women Meets World.
100 episodes.
I was gonna say thank you for being my co-host this past
Thank
100
you
episodes.
for being my co-host since 2017.
It's crazy that we've been doing it that long. Sorry, you guys. It should not have taken us this long. Like, there's so many people who like other podcasts where they were like,
Hey,
we did the whole series
the
in like a
show
week.
is growing with us, just like Boy Meets World, because that's how our devotion is. We are changing it as we change, and evolution is messy sometimes, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you guys for listening. As always, reach out to us at Brown Meets World on all of the platforms. That's that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. You can email us at brownmeetsworld@gmail.com. You can find me at I am not your Oreo on Twitter. T.
Honestly, after watching Bo Burnham's Inside, I'm a little scared of the internet after seeing it personified. You could see me on Anna Kendrick retweets. I've been retweeting Anna Kendrick's tweets, and I think that could use some love. So hit that up.
Is Anna Kendrick still tweeting?
Rarely. It's not as much as it used to. Believe me, her activity's gone real down. As someone who retweets her tweets, it's gone down.
So again, thank you guys so much. Remember to dream,
to try,
and to do good.
Yeah, and also
the world needs it. Don't get promises. Later, bros.
Later, bruh.
When this boy meets world.